Hello, ladies and gents, and welcome to Season 2 of Vicinity and Beyond with me, Henry Ginman.
And me, Julie Graham.
And we are back to talk placemaking, bids, taxes today, and all sorts. And hopefully we've brought some listeners with us from last year. So thank you to everyone who tuned in and used the podcast for a variety of reasons we've seen, haven't we?
Oh, it's been a joy, hasn't it? The feedback has been absolutely fantastic, and I think we really enjoy doing it anyway, but we enjoy it even more when we've had such great feedback. So only a week or so ago, I was in Exeter for the day with Nicola Wheeler and team, and I loved the fact that she has religiously listened to all the podcasts. She's very much using it as a kind of briefing and handbook, and she's encouraged her board to listen ahead of an away day. I think that's what we're hearing, aren't we? People are not just listening, but they're then going back and re-listening and using it as a guide.
That one that's we did for board members, I've heard that a few times being shared with a few different boards and people that I've met for the first time, and they've sort of said, "Oh, I've shared your podcast with my board." That's really good to hear. And also people saying, "Oh, this has helped me get into the industry or helped me prepare for job interview."
Oh, the amount of people, I've been doing a lot of recruitment last year, and the amount of people that in an interview have said to me, "Oh, I listened to your podcast series and they've literally are quoting back to me our words."
That's a way of buttering you up, I reckon. And
probably. It doesn't work.
So season two, more of the same, I think. But also we're going to try and push ourselves a bit out of our comfort zone and maybe look at some adjacent spaces, try and bring more insight into the room. And we're going to do that by inviting some guests. So I could put a bit of a call out to anyone to say, who would you like to see on the podcast that you think would be interesting that we can interview and get some insight from. There are some high profile people I'm trying to collar, Rory Sutherland being one of them. I met him the other day, and so if you can drop him a message into his DMs and say, please do this podcast. He might have multi-million views on his TED Talks, but maybe we get him onto our little podcast to talk about the psychology of how people shop and visit high streets. So,
and also anyone that would like to put themselves forward to join us. I think what we found in the live audience that we did was just great to have a bunch of bid experts from a variety of different bids, different scales, different sizes, different locations from around the country, all asking us questions, but also discussing amongst themselves. And it just really brought alive quite a lot of the topics. So, if people want to volunteer themselves, we will also do that.
So please do get in touch. Right, so we are at the beginning of 2026. Let's have a bit of a high street pulse check. How do we think businesses are faring out there, Julie? And what's it like on the coalface?
It's so tough. It feels such a story of doom and gloom post-Christmas. And I think there's a number of things going on. One of them that we're going to delve into today, but quite a lot of the data is telling us that businesses, whilst they may now be at pre-pandemic levels of footfall, etc., without even that being indexed, it's still not enough. But revenue-wise, profit-wise, they're nowhere near. Costs are off the scale. And so therefore, business survival is absolutely top of the list for so many people. And I'm hearing that particularly in central London, but I'm hearing it everywhere. And actually, I think one of the interesting sort of implications of that really is, whilst we're not going to talk about this in depth today, is a lot of conversations this month or January of the level of investment and activity bids can make into the sustainability and green agenda on the basis that businesses are now in a bit of a crisis mode of business survival and therefore not investing extras. And we know that even if we feel utterly wedded to sustainability, it is a premium cost and we can't push that much at the moment. So it's not a great place.
Yeah, we see that nationally, don't we? The kickback against net zero and climate objectives as people start focusing more on their, paying the bills and understandably, the more economic hard figures that they're challenged with. It's not all doom and gloom. There are some winners in there. I did see that Primark analysts, they think, are going to record £1 billion in profit in 2026 as the forecast.
It's interesting you say that one, right on the back of sustainability and net zero, isn't it? Fast fashion is making the biggest profit.
Yeah.
Economics
ruling over other factors. I saw the other day that M&S had launched a flagship store in Bath as part of a program to implement 20 new stores across the country. Sterling Thistles Shopping Centre, they reported 4% year-on-year footfall growth and are investing £6 million in their building and trying to invite some big name stores, which is sort of contrary to the world around them. And Bradford, they've relocated their historic city centre market into a £31 million purpose-built building, creating a modern food and community hub. So there are good stories out there of good things happening. And I want to give a brief shout out to High Street's Positive and the work that Laura Harris is doing and their newsletter. If you want to feel a little bit more uplifted,
isn't it good?
Then sign up to that. We'll put a link in the description, because it's not all doom and gloom. There are some winners, but it's interesting who those winners might be.
Yeah, and obviously, and we'll pick this up a bit later. I mean, there are winners on the digital economy considerably more than there are winners in bricks and mortar, and that's more to do with, there's as much to do with the cost of doing business as it is the income associated with business.
Indeed. So today's topic, we're going to dive into the fascinating, exciting world of business rates. And business rates are a very important tax on our high streets. They are a significant tax, that one of the more significant taxes on raising revenue for government from businesses. They value about 26 billion a year that goes into government coffers, of which about 50% gets retained by local authorities, so 13 billion. And that will go into local services, policing, your roads and streets, social services, into the black hole of local government financing. So that's why we're focusing on that today. And 2026 is a big year of change, because since 1990, we've had the sort of current structure of business rates. And Labour government came in saying, we're going to do some radical changes. They have, in their Pride and Place initiative that they launched in November 2025, November last year, proposed a set of changes which are the most significant changes since 1990, but still feel like they are tweaking and adapting the existing system rather than perhaps the radical change that they originally proposed.
Yeah, you say significant, but they're really they're moving the deck chairs around, and the deck is a smaller deck than it used to be, and there's less deck chairs than there used to be. To continue my analogy, and that issue about when business rates were introduced in 1990, the vast majority of business was being done in bricks and mortar, and therefore the system of taxation on that bricks and mortar was valid. What repeated reforms and reviews of business rates have promised over the last 25 years, I'm old enough to know, have been a recognition that actually that's an outdated system, and that we need to see a more proportionate capturing of the digital economy's business. And that's where the frustration is. There was nervousness about going into a Labour government with this promise/threat of significant reform, but actually there's now disappointment that we're not getting more than we're seeing, and these changes are playing with the cake is the same size. We're moving the ingredients around by proportion, so we're just hitting certain sectors more than others, but we actually need more money total.
So let's see if we can work out what we're actually seeing in these changes, in these proposals. So as a brief explainer, on business rates. There is a organization called the Valuations Office Agency who've got about 7,000 or 8,000 agents who go around the country, and they value your commercial property. And this is in a very similar way to council tax for residential properties. They come around, they look at your commercial property, and they try and assign through, I don't know what ways and means.
Comparable data.
There we go, comparable data.
And they don't necessarily come anymore because there's not enough of them. But anyway, that's a minor technical point. From their desk, they use some comparable data.
They try and come up with a rental value.
Yeah.
And so they say this building has a rental value of 10,000 a year, and that is your rateable value. And then the government comes along and they say, well, we want to change how much we want to charge business rates, a tax that's equivalent to this rental value. And they have a multiplier, which is done as a pence in the pound measure. So back in 1990, this was 30-something pence in the pound. More recently, in 2023, this was the standard multiplier was 51.2.
Yeah,
that's right. Pence in the pound. So for every pound you're paying in rent, you'd be paying 51, just over 51 pence in rates to the government. And this is important for, obviously, the sector that we do a lot of work in, business improvement districts, because the levy that is charged, it depends on the rateable value that is being charged on these businesses. And so every 3 years, they do a revaluation, because
it was every 5 actually.
Oh, really?
The first 25 years or something.
Right.
And 2015 was the first time, was the last time of a 5-year renewal. And then
COVID.
Yeah, exactly. And then it shifted. It was brought forward to 2017 rather than running to 2020. And then the next one to 2023. Now we're at 2026. It's, since 2017 has become 3-yearly.
Right. But the net result of this is, because I imagine they're doing it more regularly to try and keep up with how rents are changing over time to keep it more accurate. If rents are going up with, say, inflation, if you're increasing your multiplier from 30 pence to 50 pence, you're actually increasing over and above inflation the tax that is being levied on these businesses over time. And then the government tries to apply some reliefs, which I imagine are probably politically led and lobbying led and pressures led. And so there have been reliefs on retail, hospitality and leisure. Most recently is 2023, which effectively reduce the multiplier that you're paying. And so with these changes that are coming in this year, we are seeing a change in those multipliers. That's the biggest thing, isn't it?
Well, there's a new threshold being introduced at the $500,000 rate or value point, and that's nationwide. And any bid who's studying their values for their levy purposes will know that $500,000 in some places is highly prevalent, and $500,000 other places you're lucky if you've got one at that level. So it's a bit of a misnomer that threshold is countrywide for a start, because it impacts different characters of businesses depending on the area. But yes, that threshold is the below which we're seeing reduced multiplier, and above which we're seeing an increased multiplier.
Supplement, isn't it? It's a supplement. And I think the idea there was trying to hit those online retailers, right? The idea being that they have large commercial premises which they're using to distribute their goods. So if we have this supplement on those, therefore we're going to indirectly try and hit those bigger premises.
Not sure they did their research well enough for that
No.
point. Because when you look at the data, that absolutely isn't what's happening.
And also, it's not necessarily the bigger premises that are doing better. And you think about who we've lost in the last 10, 20 years. So there have been a lot of the big department stores that have gone, who would, I imagine, be more likely to be higher ratepayers.
There's also this absolutely necessary economic relationship, symbiotic relationship, by which all the small businesses of a high street particularly are highly reliant on that big anchor store to exist. So if we clobber the big one so much, such that we lose it, the smaller ones haven't got the anchor, they haven't got the traction anymore. And we saw that with the impact of loss of Debenhams and lots of high streets. It really did kill areas of towns where that had been the anchor for an entire street or, 2 or 3 streets.
And that's a kind of ecosystem kind of effect. I imagine incredibly hard for a government to model what the effects are of this. So it feels a bit like a sort of trial and error.
Yeah.
Let's see what happens if we do this. And if stores start closing, we might have to rethink.
Well, I mean, it's quite good ahead of that, though, to do quality consultation and ask those businesses that know how their stores run, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Might say the same for pubs, but we'll probably come on to that. Perhaps they should have asked them first, rather than having to do a U-turn. Sorry, I'm jumping the gun.
Well, let's look at the effect, because I mean, what are you seeing or what are you hearing and reading about what the effects of then these changes? Do we think we covered though what the effect is, what the changes are?
Yeah, I mean, in essence, we have an adjustments within the model to in theory, support the small businesses and clobber the larger businesses slightly. However, in practice, we've got a greater problem occurring because of the thing you said, Henry, about over recent years, RHL, retail, hospitality and leisure sectors have had this post-COVID reduction and transitional relief, such that even if their value was high, that's not what they've been paying. In the introduction of the 26 values coming in, they're not only having enormous hikes in rateable value, they're losing their RHL subsidy, and therefore the actual increasing cost is astronomical. The worst on hotels, 115% increase. That's absolutely staggering numbers. Many others are seeing quite significant increases, but the hotels one, I mean, retail's pretty high, but the hotels one is the extreme. And then just recently, anyone following this, I actually didn't even need to follow it closely, you'd have seen it, the pubs figures were enormous. That was averaging between 60 and 70% potential increases. And they have successfully lobbied. Pubs are valued slightly differently. And they have, as a sector, very successfully lobbied and managed to get, one of the numerous U-turns of government recently, actually, and got a bit of a U-turn. It's still not satisfactory by any stretch, but it is better than before. And I think it's a really positive step in that it absolutely reassures us that lobbying and data and research and influence is worth doing. So we got a bit of a result there, but it's the tip of the iceberg. There's so much more needed because we are on a very, very steep incline of values coming in from 1st of April for a whole series of sectors who can sorely afford it.
Because those figures you're reading out, those are the increases, average increases in the rateable value before any reliefs are applied. And then the government says, but it's okay, we've got this transitional relief system, which is going to replace things like the RHL, retail, hospitality and leisure reliefs with these new multipliers. So we've got the small business multiplier, standard multiplier, RHL multiplier, high value property multiplier.
All of their,
I won't go into the detail.
All of their levels of relief don't anywhere near enable a smooth transition from old numbers to new numbers. The new bills on 1st of April are still astronomical hikes, even with those reliefs in.
Yes, designed to try and avoid a sort of cliff edge, but how effective are those going to be?
Yeah.
So, I mean, we've had a look at this with various of our bids that we work with. So we got the list from the Revaluations Office Agency, and for about 17 different bids looked at what the effect was going to be on their bid areas. And in all but, I think, one case, we were seeing increases in rateable value, the highest 20% across the area, and averaging somewhere in sort of 10-15%. So this does potentially mean more on the face of it, but like more bid levy. But but that might hide some of the nuances that are happening. What it doesn't include is those businesses that don't currently pay a levy that now might do.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
it's going up, and you might be seeing more businesses coming up into over your threshold to be.
So new constituents who haven't been consulted, haven't been engaged in any way necessarily, and become new levy payers from 1st of April.
In the bid structure, yeah. So I think there's going to be a bit of a rush on, isn't there, from a bid point of view, to who are your new people and how quickly can you get out there and meet them and tell them and introduce yourself to them and say, we're here and we're here to help.
Yeah.
Is probably going to be important action to take on. But I've jumped ahead there. I've jumped ahead to bids, actually, and what the effect of is going to be. Going back to business rates, I think it's fair to say industry isn't too happy.
No.
Because this is another tax hike on top of minimum wage increases, on top of national insurance increases, on top of high energy bills, on top of
costs, high financing costs. Yeah, it's the costs are astronomical whilst the revenues are only at pre-pandemic levels. So the squeeze on profit is really, really obvious. And I think, I don't know, if I think back over a sort of 20, 30 year period where we've been looking at business rates and in relative terms to other costs and as an occupancy, percentage of occupancy cost for a business, never has there been such noise, such negative noise in all of this period. There's always, naturally, proposed increases. The immediate reaction is we've got to lobby and try and prevent that increase or minimise the, impact. But never has there been as much noise as this. And that's, I think, because it is this stacking of cost, many of which are almost hidden costs, but are really beginning to take hold now. And some of which, because they're phased, they've been announced back when, but haven't quite come in. And 1st of April is the first real critical moment where so many of these businesses are going to top out on cost and just genuinely feel they can't survive. And it's not about supply and demand. It's not that they haven't got a decent quality business with a demand. They're filling their seats in a restaurant. They're filling their, places in the pub. They're filling their rooms in a hotel, but they can't make the business viable because the costs are too high.
Because of what you were saying earlier, the fact that footfall and spend is recovering, but your cost base is so much higher, so your margin is shrunk, if not gone.
Not gone. And there's a really interesting, we won't get into the detail of this, I don't necessarily today, but if you read and really immerse yourself in the pub side of this and all the research and lobbying that was done around the pub values, so many pubs, particularly outside main cities actually, but are run by, they're independent. They're run by an individual or a couple or a family, and they already don't take salaries.
Yeah.
They live there, it's their business, it's their livelihood, it's their pastime, and breaking even doesn't mean breaking even with salaries paid. It's already salaries are not paid. They're doing it for the love, and now they can't even break even. So it's so much worse from a commercial viability point of view than it first looks on the surface.
Yeah, it does feel that these days you have to be a former celebrity to own a pub, doesn't it?
We have
James May,
and you have to have you have to have a pile of money that means it just ideally washes its face, but doesn't have to, because they have other income. And that's exactly what's going on. And those are the ones that I guess in some ways are more successful. But what does success look like? It doesn't mean necessarily pure economic viability with all costs covered, because a load of costs don't need to be covered.
Did you see Jeremy Clarkson saying that he's banning all Labour MPs from his pub now in the Putswell?
Yes, yeah. Well, he's got plenty of people going, so he won't miss the customers.
Yeah. The one campaign that stood out to me was the UK Hospitality Taxed Out campaign.
Yeah.
I'm not sure when they launched that, because some of the stats that they're talking about actually go back to the 2024 budget,
Yeah.
And
They've been doing some brilliant work over the last 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
And particularly targeted on the entire hospitality sector, but particularly targeted on the concerns of threatening tourist tax, which we'll pick up on another day. But they're really strongly demonstrating the squeeze on that sector and just how difficult it is to cover costs, but also the negative implications on the government's coffers of losing these business sectors through loss of jobs and everything else. And that's that sort of, I say this carefully, and I'm not showing a political colour by saying this, but I struggle with this concept of believing redistribution of income is the only way to survive, because economically we have to have economic growth to have a successful economy to be able to then redistribute some income down. And I worry that we're not in that space at the moment.
Yes, you've got to have something to redistribute.
Right. And if the whole pot is staying
Too small.
stagnant or reducing, everybody loses. And we've got to get to a place where some are winning to enable others to win alongside them. And I don't feel like we're in that space. I think the UK hospitality data shows that really well.
Because we do have these demographic problems, the number of people in work problems, which mean that our productivity is so low, that mean we're not producing enough GDP value, real economic value, which is then producing tax off the back of it. So I think it's a really valid point. The cake is too small. To try and illustrate that point, I was looking at the UK hospitality figures. They reckon that 89,000 job losses within the 9 months from the 2024 budget. And you can probably criticise my method here, but I assumed that the average amount of tax collected from one of those people was £8,270, which would be the
Through income tax.
True income
Right,
tax.
okay, yeah.
Because I think, to put this in scale, income tax is responsible for about 300 billion in our tax take. Business rates, 36 billion.
Yeah.
26 billion.
Oh,
So
a lot.
13 billion goes to
just around,
but nowhere near. It's less than 10%. Less than 20% compared to it was collected through income tax. So 89,000 job losses. If you assume the average, I imagine they're probably slightly less than average. That's 730 million less income tax coming from that sector.
But it's worse than that, isn't it? Because those people then need welfare support.
Oh, potentially, yeah.
Actually,
It could go either way. They could get jobs elsewhere and then it come back, or
a
they could need
proportion
support.
could require welfare support. Yeah.
And so this is, I guess, an argument that's often made is you've got to move the biggest needles.
Right.
And the biggest needle is on your income tax. Obviously, they're not going to do that. We are getting political today.
Wait, I know. It's quite difficult not to when you talk about taxation.
Tax, yeah. But business rates are a significant one on businesses. But if the businesses get hit so hard that there are job losses, potentially this has a really adverse effect on the economy. And we need businesses. We need higher employment. We need, that's where growth comes from. People producing things. Labour government.
And going back to the point earlier about high streets, and as you say, the really positive work Laura Harris is doing on high streets positive. Ultimately, a high street is the barometer of economic health of a region. And so we can never in isolation worry about, improving a shopfront here and there and believe that in itself will create a buoyant high street, because actually we need an economy, a successful economy around a high street to ensure that there are customers and there's a vibrancy that then feeds that high street economy. And at the moment, I think there's these sort of propositions, particularly actually in the Pride and Place programme, that are about intervention at a very small way and community-based without recognising we need a pot of money to make that work, and not just government money. It's great that government are going to put money into some of these things, but it's self-serving. We've got to have economic growth. We've got to have successful industry in a region to then create a positive economic position for a high street to survive.
I do find some of the language quite interesting around this idea that because you're giving relief, that the government is funding that relief. So a lot of the language is, when we're doing, what you're doing is just taking less.
Yeah.
But it's like, we're funding this. You're not funding this. You're just taking less in the first place.
Yeah. Well, and in essence, I say the same thing to bids, actually. When we look at bid levy rules, and people get obsessed with the idea of capping at the top level, and my watchword is always, to have a cap, someone else is subsidising that relief, in effect. So be careful who you think you're going to subsidise. Why should smaller businesses in an area subsidise the enormous business because it happens to be at the top of the rates list? It's there for a reason, usually, because it's a highly profitable business and it has the greatest footprint in a place. It doesn't mean they warrant relief. So someone has to subsidise that relief always, don't they?
So you'd agree with
So I
that
add
sort of language?
So and this is what and often the conversation I have with a bid, they say, we're going to do caps here. Why? Well, because it's high. Yeah, but why? Why does it warrant a relief? And usually, not always, but usually, you talk someone out of having a cap. Because I'm not comfortable with a profitable large business that can and should pay its fair share being subsidised by smaller medium-sized businesses that are paying their share.
Well, if you're worrying you were showing your political colours earlier, people will definitely not know where you stand.
Yeah.
So let's look at this question then of the unfairness versus the online world, because that's, I guess, one of the key things that they're trying to address in this. And the question is does it? So you've given us some stats on the RV changes of hotels, as high as 115%, as high as 76% for pubs. Interestingly, I think these stats came from LBC, so quite a left-wing publication. Online logistics, they think 16%. Supermarkets barely touched at 4%. So online and logistics, 16% compared to pubs, hotels, small retail, all 50% or greater.
Yeah, yeah. And when going back to my point about Heart of London's proposed real rates reform, that their prospect or their proposition is that it's a hybrid model that recognises bricks and mortar mustn't bear the majority share anymore. The digital economy must bear its fair share. And their data says that retail and hospitality account for about 9% of the economy, but their business rates bills account for 34% of the rates cost, whereas digital economy accounts for about 20% of the economy, and their rates burden is only 7 to 9%. So there's just this completely uneven playing field of who's paying the money. And interestingly, as you said earlier, one of the drivers for this rates reform was government telling us that they're going to put some additional burden on this digital economy and to ensure they're paying their fair share. It absolutely isn't doing that. Tiny adjustment, but it's just not capturing that. And what HOLBA do in quite a lot of detail now in their proposition is say you've got to find a way to charge them and ensure that they genuinely make contribution to this pot. And at the moment, these minor tweaks just don't touch the size.
And they're actually proposing an alternative.
Yeah, they're proposing an alternative that keeps the business rates system on bricks and mortar and creates a charging mechanism onto digital economy via VAT. And in simple terms, it feels very workable. It feels very achievable. There's been various attempts historically to consider whether some kind of online tax is workable. I think the scale of the industry wasn't perhaps enough, but also the need wasn't great enough before for it to have enough political imperative to move. I think now the dial has moved so far towards this huge challenge on bricks and mortar that it's gone too long. We have to look at how we make a better, fair system. And it's worth, if our listeners, if bits haven't read it, go onto Heart of London Business Alliance website. They've got a load of reading, they've got the basics, and then they've got a load of kind of tools behind it of the webinars and the papers they've been doing. And they've been heavily lobbying, and they're getting some traction. Now, whether they'll actually get this significant change at this stage, it's yet to be seen, but they're getting traction, and somebody needs to be saying this. It's great that they're saying it, and it's great that it's coming from our industry, because somebody absolutely needs to be saying it. Whilst we will lobby all of these individual rate changes, because we have to, there's a bigger problem than that really only takes from Peter to pay Paul, so it really doesn't give us enough of a result.
I imagine there'll be lots of people who would want to join that alliance and with them and lobby alongside. Is there a way to do that?
Oh, actually, very good question. Absolutely, yes, I'm sure. It's being led by Ros Morgan, Chief Exec at HOLBA, with a strong team behind her. And yeah, I mean, get in touch with me or get in touch with Ros. And I think a lot of people are following and supporting that campaign. They've got some good traction with opposition, but still progressing with the government.
Thank everyone for listening, as this hopefully not too pessimistic start to the year, and we will return to look at business rates in a little bit more detail for business improvement districts, and what the effect is going to be on them and what they might want to consider.
Great.
Julie.
Thank you.